this is Dr. Sean Benzinger with secondopinion.org with another seminar, and today's seminar is about GI dysfunction, possibly bowel gas problems, possibly indigestion, possibly poor digestion, possibly just hurting. But what we know is when GI dysfunction gets bad, there's trouble in paradise. Two out of three of the most frequently purchased over-the-counter medications are for the gut. You guessed it, the gut. It's very, very frequent, and the reason why is because the symptoms associated with the gut and our digestion is a very important part of our well-being because it's where we absorb all of our nutrients. So one thing that we always try to cover is just what stress does to the gut. The GI tract differences between men and women, dysfunction, hydrochloric acid deficiency, something I call the real problem, GI tract imbalance, common symptoms and treatments, and how to take care of your tummy. Just some step-by-step processes, okay? First of all, we always talk about the GI tract as the other brain, the second brain. It communicates constantly with the first brain to run the rest of your world. In other words, your brain is connected directly to your GI tract through something called the vagus nerve. Extremely, extremely important. The reason why is we found that even neurologic problems and gut problems many times correlate together once someone has been deceased, and they have evaluated certain parts of the colon and the brain, found some of the same type of appearances specifically in certain areas of the colon and the brain over and over. So there's a direct connection. It's not a indirect connection, it's a direct connection. What you think does affect your gut. So what we also know is the gut itself is a major protection to your body, as is skin, to protect you from getting infections and other things like that. The internal gut is the same as the skin on the outside. It stops you from having vulnerability from invaders that end up coming in, such as bacteria and viruses and other parasites, worms, things like that. Yeah, those are a real factor, so we've got to address it. GI tract and stress, the brain itself, it indicates a two-way connection between them, okay? Remember, it's called the vagus nerve, and you'll see it right here on the screen. Some lesions in the brain show identical changes as in the colon. The example was Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. Those are two things that we know. So thus, emotion and mental stress can cause bowel problems to get worse. And what we know is irritable bowel dysfunction, ulcers are a good example of what's bugging you. Now there are other causes, but we know that that plays a role and should be considered, okay? What we know is GI tract differences between men and women. Food takes longer to get through a woman's GI tract. In other words, you're slower digesters of food, except during your period. For some reason, it kind of picks up. Don't know why that is the case, but it has to be a hormonal-based issue, okay? Women's bile system is different. Women have more gallstone attacks than men do, and what they say is it's a thicker bile, so it has a tendency to form stones more easily. And women have 6 times the amount of irritable bowel syndrome, as well as GI tract disturbances, such as Crohn's disease as an example. During menstruation, the glucose increases 3 to 9 times in the saliva, sugar cravings. In other words, basically, your saliva becomes sweet in comparison to what it is at other times. So maybe that's also the draw towards sugary foods, and all the more reason to be wiser about what you add, which will be protein and things like this. If you've not gotten our carbohydrate and protein seminars, it might be a great step to be able to understand the benefits of why protein balance and this specific issue needs to be addressed for your better, your well-being, because the whole point of eating a box of chocolates and 6 Cokes probably isn't the healthiest thing in the world, okay? Now, what we know is dysfunction causes in the colon, it causes protracted suffering. It can be emotionally caused. In other words, every time you get upset, your gut hurts. That's a possibility. Those things really do happen. People who use anti-inflammatories consistently get gut problems. Why? It actually damages your colon lining, okay? So realize if you're the constant, now that's not, and let's just say this, unless you're very susceptible, that's not the person who takes the single aspirin of 80 milligram a day. That's very minimal. But those that are taking 1, 2, and 3 doses every day for the knee problem, shoulder problem, other problems, okay, we know that every time you do, you tear up your gut lining and you predispose yourself to more gut problems. So keep that in mind. And a poor diet, okay, the wrong diet for you can make a big difference on the dysfunction or cause the dysfunction. Autonomic imbalance, in other words, emotional changes. Person who's always under stress, constantly under stress to a point where they can't get away from it, seems to have more problems. Those people that take antacids for years and years and years, you are changing your balance within your GI tract, whether it be the stomach, small intestine, or large intestine, to a point where it's changing your nutrition. And our nutrition seminars, vitamins A through Z, if you will look at any one of those vitamins, we talk about antacid use as a really big issue, okay? Vitamin and mineral deficiencies can be the end result of any kind of dysfunction over a period of time. And why is that important? Vitamins and minerals are those things your body must have put into it on a daily basis, or you will start suffering from symptoms related to a vitamin deficiency. It is not a gross one. It can just slowly, such as anemia. That's more of a gross one. Well, fatigue, tiredness, anxiousness, irritability, and lots of other things actually occur prior to that, and it can be complex that's not being absorbed in the body. So you might want to look at our vitamin seminars. It might be helpful. Liver and gallbladder dysfunction is big in our society because the liver and gallbladder are key components in detoxification of the body. And if in fact those are dysfunctioning, guess what that means? Your detoxification process is dysfunctioning, which means your capacity to actually be building up garbage in your system to a point where it makes you unhealthy is likely. Pancreatic dysfunction. Okay, your blood sugar issues, that is a possibility. And age reduction secretions, we know that people age that have disease processes. Well, you having a bad tummy on a constant basis is actually a good example of that. GI tract must have 7 liters per day, 7 liters or 7 quarts. Well, liters is not quarts, so we're looking at about 64 ounces to 84 ounces of fluid per day. To be able to keep your GI tract going. Why? It advances detoxification, increases the bowel function. So for you that have constipation problems, let's not spend our whole time on using laxatives. Let's start increasing our water and see if that solutions some of the problem. Keeps your general water balance, inflammation problems, swelling problems, other things like that. Fatigue in the middle of the day. We know that water can play a role in those areas. Enzymes and chemical reactions are more efficiently removed or more efficiently activated in your body for its benefit and reduces stress on the colon. So we know water is something you're going to have to add. Let's start at the top, which is just chewing saliva. When saliva flow is heavy and consistent, the person seems to be healthier in general. Okay, so for those that have a very runny or light saliva, you might be having some problems that need to be addressed ahead of time. Hormone testing is best done with the saliva instead of blood in certain hormonal cases. You might want to keep that in mind. Depressed people and unhealthy people have lower saliva flow, okay? And that can be induced either by the medication itself or could be a tendency of serotonin or melatonin might play a role somehow that we at this point don't fully understand, okay? The esophagus. Women's are shorter. That's the connection between the mouth going to the stomach. Women's is shorter, okay? Why is that a big issue? Well, the contractions then are stronger and they can mimic having a heart attack and you're really having esophageal problems. In other words, GERD or regurgitation of acid that's creating a problem. So serious problems occur when you ignore these areas, okay? A gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, can occur, and when that occurs you might think you're having a heart attack when you're not, and you went in several times, the doctor can't find anything, you're afraid that you really are having a heart problem, they're not finding it. GERD might be something to look at. Severely mistreated without common sense. Common sense is something we're going to try to talk about. So we want to find out what's happening and why it's occurring and why the GERD is caused in the first place and try to look at a way to solution it on a conservative route first, okay? When we're looking at GERD, more to do with little too acid than too much acid. We're sold the idea that it's way too much acid inside your stomach that's creating the problem and it's backing up into your esophagus or burning your stomach lining. Let me tell you something about stomach acids that are really important. Stomach acids, hydrochloric acid specifically, you can pour lots of it into your stomach and that lining is made to be able to withstand hydrochloric acid. It's not made to withstand other types of acids. So we know that antacids and stimulant medications can over time cause less and less acid, and if your problem was you didn't have enough acid to be able to digest your food, break it down and get it into the small intestine and it just kept building up until finally it started refluxing, That is frequent, mostly if you're 40 and above, very frequent. I'm going to tell you, very frequent. So try a logical approach. Use vinegar or citrus acid and put it in, vinegar, sometimes people don't like that taste, so you might use lemons or limes and actually put that into a glass, fill it with water or something like that, and actually drink it and see if you find that your acid problem actually gets better after you've eaten food. So we're eating food, we might drink this potion, I call it a potion, during that time, and you might find that it actually helps the digestion. You don't get as much acid reflux. Well, is there too much acid or too little acid? That would tell you. If it makes your symptoms much worse, well, maybe you're one of those unusual cases that really do have hyperacidity, okay? Or it might just be you ate some bad food and your body can't handle it, okay? Which is, by the way, common in Americans. Pancreatic enzymes could be added, and those are inexpensive. Any health food store has them, or any kind of a quality alternative healthcare doc would have those things, and that's another option too, okay? Do not eat large meals, and don't lie down on that recliner, guys, and wonder why you get that regurgitation, or go to bed on it and wonder why that's a problem, or sit down and lean forward over your computer. That creates a problem too, because you're forcing it up your esophagus by force. So those might be things that you can do to remove it or reduce it, if nothing else. And over 40 years old, those secretions are a big issue. If those things are reduced, that can create a majority of the problem that you're dealing with and not even know it. So when we look at the stomach, man's stomach secretes about 1/3 more acid and empties 1/3 faster than women's stomachs do. And women suffer from more abdominal bloating and gas, often after meals, because of slow digestion. So improving that is a big issue. Progesterone, something of the female hormones, helps protect the gut lining. So if your progesterone is low, could be causing some of your stomach problems too. So tying all this together is what's important. Often we try to independently address one issue at a time, and while we're addressing a single issue at a time, we create some of the other problems elsewhere in the body and ignore them, and then treat them with things that actually wasn't even the cause in the first place. So maybe progesterone, having some hot flashes, having some other issues, maybe that's what's related to your gut problems too, okay? Good acids must be present. If in the chyme, which is your spit basically, that enters saliva is in the mouth, the chyme itself is actually the food that's inside your stomach itself, okay? If it's going to open up the entranceway between the stomach and the small intestine, okay? The chyme itself needs to get to a pH of about 3.0. That's what we're trying to get it to. If it doesn't get to that, then it doesn't open up and doesn't push the food into the small intestine unless stimulated by medications. The hormones of digestion do not adequately stimulate the gallbladder or the pancreas to work correctly. So the bottom line is, if the chyme doesn't get to pH, which takes, we're trying to get it down in pH so that it has enough acidity to break down proteins and fats specifically, our big issue here. If we don't do that, or when we do that, I should say, your gallbladder kicks in something called bile salts to be able to break down your fats, and your pancreas kicks in enzymes to be able to break down your proteins, your carbohydrates, and your fats. So very important, but guess what would happen if the pH is not reaching that 3.0? Well, then we're creating multiple problems with digestion because we're not getting the enzymes necessary to do that, okay? So if lack of acid in the stomach is not corrected, everything after that gets worse, okay? Produces more symptoms, and what we know is this, okay? On average, we have 2 pounds of bacteria in each of us in the gut itself, mostly in the gut itself. The worse the pH, the worse the overgrowth of bad bacteria, as well as other causes, such as dietary, alcohol, antibiotics, all play a role in this overgrowth of bad bacteria overgrowing. Well, guess what? Bad bacteria overgrows, then you have other problems because you're not digesting for folic acid, B12, if you have anemia problems. This might be an issue. So having the correct amount of acid, not always the high acid, we probably need enough acid. Mostly over 40 years old, you start secreting less and less acid. If you don't have enough, the chyme doesn't form to a 3.0, you don't get digestion of your nutrition, you get overgrowth of bacteria, so possibly having hydrochloric acid might actually be something you need to consider, not actually move away from, okay? Here's the low stomach acid symptoms. Loss of taste for meat, just don't like it. Now that's not the vegetarians that absolutely won't touch meat for other reasons, but they just really are not hungry for meat. There's usually a reason. Halitosis, just really bad breath. Okay, ulcers that seem to be occurring, whether it be duodenal, in other words small intestine, or in the stomach, belching. You eat and you belch and you belch and you belch. I always know when my hydrochloric acid needs a little extra support, because this problem comes and goes depending on what you eat, stress, how much sleep you're getting, and other things too. So keep that in mind. It's not consistent. We'd all love to just do the same thing every day and everything work out. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately, okay? Gas, bloating shortly after meals will maybe be low acid, and heartburn is actually not too much acid, possibly too little acid, and body odor. So you might recommend at that point that we might try some low dosage hydrochloric acid from your health food store or alternative healthcare doc. It might help. Now here's some of the other signs then of hydrochloric acid deficiency. Burning stomach, coated tongue, and that comes with candidiasis or overgrowth of yeast that might occur. Babies get this pretty frequently too. Gas shortly after eating, burning or itching of the anus can be you're not breaking down fats, create some other problems, and it will show up at the other end. Burning, greasy foods upset your stomach a lot, which could be gallbladder or not enough hydrochloric acid. So just cutting out the gallbladder might not be the answer. The stools are lightly colored, so maybe you're not getting enough hydrochloric acid in those cases. Pain between the shoulder blades, bitter metallic taste, and overuse of laxatives, and you crave sweets a lot, and we're not talking about just during the period. So here's some of the other treatment options. You can use baking soda or vinegar, or citrus juice of limes, lemons, things like that. Not oranges, by the way, but limes and lemons. In other words, if you have too much acid, baking soda, a teaspoon in a glass should make you feel a lot better. If you have too little acid, vinegar or lime or lemon juice should make you feel better. So it just depends. Or just add hydrochloric acid, small amounts, with the alternative doctor's assistance, and you might end up with the right treatment for that too. There are other types of treatments, but those are the ones that usually on your own you can kind of get a general evaluation as long as you're not having too many symptoms. If it's severe pain, that's a different story, okay? Hydrochloric acid many times is not the problem. Too little acid is frequently the problem, and you need to keep that in mind. So we might end up with just not enough acid in our colon, and that might create some of the symptoms you're dealing with, okay? Hydrochloric acid does not hurt your stomach, we've talked about that, but if you're taking anti-inflammatories or ulcer type of medications, you could predispose yourself to where the hydrochloric acid actually does burn your stomach if you're taking lots of anti-inflammatories and been doing it for many years. There's a lot of issues. Remember, we're losing approximately 16,000 people die of overusing anti-inflammatories that are over the counter that you're buying and using on a consistent basis. The amount of liver disease that's being induced because you use so much of the acetaminophen, Tylenol is one of the trade names for one of those, is amazing. The overuse, remember it says 3 to 7 days, 5 to 7 days use, after that talk to the doc. Many of you don't do that. You keep using them, using them, using them, creating some of the problem. Here's some of the other problems. Putrefaction and sulfur byproducts are commonly the cause of acid reflux. In other words, food just sits in your colon. Now think about it this way. Let's go ahead and take a bunch of food and let's just throw it on the cement in 98-degree weather, okay? 98.6 degree weather. Sun's beating down on it. How long do you think that would take to smell and look pretty crummy and just awful, absolutely awful? Well, that's what happens in your colon if it just sits there. Within an hour, within 30 minutes to an hour, that should be moving out of your small intestine, your stomach into your small intestine. Well, guess what happens if that's not occurring? Exactly the problem that we're dealing with. The breakdown of, let's say you had some broccoli and cauliflower and a little bit of meat and whatever. Well, the sulfur that's inside the organic foods, which by the way, good choice in foods, but that sulfur is a very toxic acid, even in small amounts. And that alone can cause a lot of this GERD. Is it the sole cause? No, it's a combination of the hydrochloric acid building up, and there not being enough to finally open up that small intestine. Remember that many of the medications that you're taking to be able to take care of your quote-unquote too much acid works because it increases your colon getting food through it. In other words, it increases up to sometimes 25 to 35% increase in colon function just because of those medications. You think you're taking them just because it's reducing the acid. What's really happening is, might be reducing the acid. It's also increasing the flow of your food through your colon. Two things then happen. You don't get enough acid in it to kick in the normal process to digesting your food. That's key. The second issue associated with that is the food goes through sometimes so fast that you don't digest enough of the food to be able to get the nutrients needed. So long-term use without finding causes always concerns me. So look further if you can. So sometimes the remedy can make your symptoms worse long-term. So find the problem, then fix it. Try not to let the symptoms mislead you into doing things that just give you temporary relief but don't correct the problem. Okay? Just something to think about. Irritable bowel syndrome. 15% of all adults have it, 3 to 6 times more frequently in women. 2 million prescriptions and 3 million doctor visits per year. That's a lot of money spent on irritable bowel syndrome, isn't it? Small intestine dysfunction is most common. Well, that's not a big surprise, is it? If we can't get the stomach to work right, to prepare the food right, I wonder if the small intestine is going to pay dues. More than likely it is going to. Mental stressors do play a big role in irritable bowel, but is not the sole cause. And food allergies. You can't eat junk food the rest of your life and wonder why you have irritable bowel conditions, okay? Functional bowel disease becoming more common of a diagnosis. It's a catch-all term for those that are not IBS. If you don't have IBS, guess what you have? Functional bowel disease. Here's some of the symptoms include GERD, which is that reflux, heartburn, nausea, vomiting, bloating, abdominal pain, early fullness after eating, just feel like you just can't put any more in, and fibromyalgia symptoms. In other words, muscles, tendons, ligaments might start hurting afterwards, okay? Women are 20 times more affected than men, 20 times, and hormone fluxes and oral contraceptives, and if you haven't looked at our vitamins and mineral seminars, you'll find that that will help get a better understanding of what oral contraceptives really do to you, and something I'd highly recommend you review. Neurologic pace setting of the bowel disturbed, frankly, in other words, the bowel is kind of like the heart, it has a rhythm to it. And when the rhythm gets disturbed, it's called functional bowel disease, okay? So, if we're looking at GI imbalance itself, okay, we get certain types of categories that we're worried about. Digestive distress, in other words, we just can't digest our food. The biliary or liver system, the small intestine itself, and how you handle sugar can create a problem because B vitamins might end up becoming a major deficiency that can create other symptoms. So let's look at GI functions. It breaks down food for digestion. Responsible for every major nutrient needed in the body and tags them for where they go. I mean, it's unbelievably complex down there, but the GI tract then absorbs, tags proteins, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, minerals, enzymes, cofactors, and trace minerals, and then tells them kind of where to go and what cells to get to and what to do with themselves, okay? Selectively integrates other organs to help the body function correctly. So the GI tract does a lot more than just quote-unquote digest food. It coordinates where those nutrients and many other types of things occur in the body and makes sure the rest of the organ systems are working together for your best benefit. So it's primary to your immune system. Remember, it's an immune defense system because it's a blockade of bad things not getting into your system. Here's just a general picture of the digestive tract. You see the mouth and the esophagus, and then the stomach, and then you see small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and then of course the liver itself. You see some of its positioning, if nothing else, and I find that sometimes that's beneficial to people. If we look at digestive distress, here's some of the general symptoms, okay? Bad breath, halitosis, loss of taste for high protein foods, we've talked about that. Burning or nervous stomach, eating seems to relieve that. Gas shortly after eating. Indigestion half an hour to an hour afterwards, lasting 3 to 4 hours until finally it gets into that small intestine, gets out of your system, or doesn't affect your symptoms as bad. Difficulty digesting fruits and vegetables. They come out in particles because your body never breaks them down. That's another idea that maybe not enough hydrochloric acid exists. Acid or spicy foods upset it and upset your general stomach. Now, let's look at the liver and the gallbladder and their jobs and how they integrate. We kind of finished off the stomach. So It's a major detoxification organ. It frankly takes care of all the garbage, drugs, hormones, toxins, and hopefully wipes them out and gets them into your colon or your urinary system and gets them out of your system. Helps maintain blood sugar when you've not eaten. There's a dynamic pattern called glucagon that comes from the pancreas into the liver and helps break down your fat cells when you're trying to lose weight. If that system's not there or your liver is not working well, guess what? That system could be interrupted because you have toxic liver and might not allow you to lose weight and you're doing everything else right for whatever reason, okay? Breaks down fat for energy, supplies specific elements so you can break down fats and absorb them. In other words, if their bile salts are not secreted into your small intestine, you will not break down the fats that make, such as vitamins, such as D, E, F. There's many other types of nutrients that need to be, essential fatty acids, omega-3 and omega-6, omega-9 oils. They don't break down and get into your system, you're a very unhealthy person. Your neurologic system will suffer greatly. Every cell in the body is dependent upon fats to protect itself, okay? It maintains homeostasis and balance in your system. So the signs of dysfunction, headaches over your eyes, okay? Right more than left, but it can be both. Pain between your shoulder blades, gallbladder sometimes first thing you think about. Bitter metallic taste in your mouth, especially in the mornings when you get up. Bloating after meals that lasts is about an hour or 2 hours later, all of a sudden, you really feel it and you just feel bloated and your pants feel tight and distended. Stools are gray or tan instead of brown, okay? Mostly darker brown actually. Greasy foods upset your stomach. Tenderness in the web between your forefinger, right here and right here. Okay, that could be an indicator also, okay? And we recommend at that point that you start looking at gallbladder and liver support for these areas. So here's some of the symptoms. Lower bowel gas, bloating several hours afterwards, okay? Feet are burning. Whites of your eyes can turn yellow in these types of cases, okay? Dry skin, itchy feet, or skin peels off the feet, okay? You know, some people are always peeling skin off their feet. That can be an issue because of fats. That's the biggest issue usually. Brown spots or bronzing of the skin itself, but brown spots, aging spots before their time. Bitter and metallic taste in the mouth, we've talked about. Blurred vision, headaches over the eyes, right more than left, remember. Feels nauseous after you've eaten fats, as well as you gag easily. You just always have the gag reflex. It's very aggressive gag reflex. Color of those stools is light brown or even yellow, and that's something that you want to get into your doctor for if you see that. Greasy or high-fat foods cause more distress than what you would expect. Between the shoulder blades, we know that's painful. And dark circles underneath your eyes can be toxins, okay? As well as other factors. Remember, these are not concrete. Boy, I have this, it must be this. There are many other factors, but these are the most common ones. Dragon breath, just bottom line is your breath smells. History of gallbladder attacks or gallstone attacks themselves, or your gallbladder has been removed, is going to change how you're going to absorb fats and break down other contents in your colon, and is an issue. And your appetite is reduced, abnormally reduced, okay? Some of the other bowel distress areas, coated tongue, fuzzy debris on the tongue itself. You can't get off, doesn't matter how many times you brush your teeth and actually paint it with your brush trying to get off that stuff. You just can't get rid of it. Pass large amounts of foul-smelling gas. Now, some people would say that was my father's profession because he was so good at it. But anyhow, it's a problem many times with bowel distress. Irritable bowel syndrome, mucus colitis, okay? You have a coating sometimes even on your fecal material that you know is abnormal. Constipation and diarrhea alternates. Have one and then the other and then one and the other. Or just straight constipation that you constantly come back to, okay? Bowel movements are painful or difficult. And you got to use laxatives over and over again to get them going, which causes this vicious cycle. That is really a big issue. Burning or itching in the anus, remember that might be low amounts of hydrochloric acid. So here's some of the dietary changes you have to consider. Remove refined carbohydrates, okay? Dairy products, fried foods, and hydrogenated fatty acids such as oils that are unhealthy for you, such as French fries, things that French fries are in. Increase your fruits, your vegetables, whole grains, and beans in the diet to obtain more fiber. Okay? Between 25 and 45 grams of fiber makes a big difference unless you have irritable bowel syndrome. You're going to have to address it differently. Okay? Increase pure water, 64 ounces a day, okay, between the meals. Do not drink water while you're in the meals. That is a very unhealthy thing to do. And the reason why I say that is it dilutes the acid in your stomach that's necessary to be able to get food through. So those that drink their meals, let me tell you, you probably do have digestive problems and probably are developing nutritional deficiencies because of that dilution factor, okay? So include lots of raw fresh fruits and vegetables, including flaxseed, canola oils, sesame seed, olive oils, because those are very healthy for you. Okay, let's go to the pancreas because it plays a huge role in digestion in the body, okay? It secretes insulin and glucagon to maintain your blood sugar. We know about insulin because of diabetes and everything. It secretes many enzymes that prepare carbohydrates and proteins to be absorbed by the GI tract. In other words, if they're not prepared right, they're just going to go right on out and you're not going to get any benefit for it. Remember, the reason that you eat is to get nourishment. So empty calorie foods are very detrimental to you because they're eating up your calories that you need to be able to get nutrient-rich foods. If you've not seen our vitamin and mineral seminars, please do, because then you know that eating those poor quality foods and shoving a few vitamins in alone is not the way to go. I highly recommend against those type of actions because it's going to catch you in the end. There's too many other beneficial nutrients in foods that we can't supplement you for. Okay, so keep that in mind. Estrogen and progesterone seems to help protect women from problems with pancreatic cancer. So there's, many times women get slammed on lots of diseases, and at least here's one you got some protection for. Cancer is 3 times more frequent in men. Certain types of testosterone seems to be the reason why, okay? So those that take testosterone or bodybuilders and are taking it prematurely, pancreatic cancer is frequently a condition, okay? Signs of pancreatic dysfunction: inability to tolerate vegetables, especially green leafy vegetables. You don't have the enzymes to break them down so they come out looking whole, okay? Many of you go, oh, that's me. Yeah, that's why I don't eat them, because it makes my tummy feel bad and it always comes out looking like I didn't digest any of it. Moody, irritable without food. You haven't eaten for a period of time, blood sugar might be an issue and you need to get to work on getting this pancreas healed. And you wake up between 1 and 4 o'clock a.m. on a consistent basis, either hungry or just not able to go back to sleep. It might be because your blood sugar is dropping too low in the night and it's waking you up, okay? And mostly if you have cravings for food at night, okay? Cravings for sugars, sharp sugars to get your energy up, that's another issue. And need to eat frequently or need sweetie type of drinks to keep yourself going during the day, which is very unhealthy long term because it's not nutrient rich, it's just sugar rich. Create some other problems, okay? So I tell people, 5 to 6 small handfuls of meals all day long is very healthy for you because you actually will lose weight and feel better, and the swelling kind of decreases if you start eating frequent, small, healthy meals that are protein rich and healthy fatty acid rich, okay? Inability to tolerate sweets will occur. I eat them now and I can't handle it. I mean, I feel awful afterwards, okay? Or you haven't eaten for 1 to 3 hours and you're irritable. I mean, you're yelling at everybody in the car next to you and who's in front of you and who didn't turn on the turn signal, and you're screaming at your boss and you got all these negative thoughts. Blood sugar might be low, okay? So you might have to eat every 2 to 4 hours to keep those sugar blues down. Here's some of those other symptoms repeated. Crave sweets or coffee in the afternoon or mid-morning, or caffeine just to keep yourself going. Hungry between meals or an excessive appetite. Overeat sweets. Eat when you're nervous or anxious or worried or for any reason. Irritable before meals, I should say. Shaking or lightheadedness if you haven't eaten for a period of time. There are some people got to have dinner at a certain time because by that time their blood sugar is so low, you don't talk to mom or you don't talk to dad until they eat because they're probably going to rip your head off, that type feeling. And the kids can be the same because many of these meals that they have at the schools are so poor, they come home and they need some quality food to try to get their system up. Our daughter walks in, I shove a half an apple in her mouth, and then I talk to her a little later because I know that's an issue, even though we many times send her food with her. Fatigue, eating relieves that fatigue sometimes. That's another good sign of blood sugar or your pancreas is struggling. Heart palpitations if you miss meals or if they're delayed. So heart palpitations can occur. You've been checked, everything's negative. Here's another possibility. Remember, we might have the contractions for women in the esophagus, and we might have heart palpitations because of blood sugar problems, okay? Waking a few hours after you sleep, hard to get back to sleep, it could be blood sugar. Let's look at B deficiencies that can cause some of these problems, because the small intestine is where most all your Bs are absorbed, and many times are messed up because of lots of the medications that many of us are taking. Remember, 2 out of 3 over-the-counter medications relate to your colon somehow, or your GI tract, stomach, or something like that, your belly. Muscle soreness after moderate exercise. Haven't done a whole lot, but really sore. Vulnerable to insect bites. Boy, everybody, they love you. General B complex might be an issue, okay? And when you do get them, you get these big marks and real red, and it raises real quickly. Loss of muscle tone or heaviness in the arms of the legs. Enlarged heart or heart failure can be from B issues, and we've known that for many years if it's an extreme case. You feel insecure, you're highly emotional, you just can't stay settled down. You're always worried about everything, and frankly, you're worried about things that don't even exist sometimes. You almost look for things to worry. Pulse is slow, 65 or below 65, slower, it's below 65, and it's irregular in its pulse. Remember, your doctor needs to know if your pulse is irregular. That's another issue. Dietary changes, increase complex carbohydrates, real grains. Again, real grains. High fiber diet is beneficial. 25 to 35 grams per day. Small meals frequently, mini meals we call them, are very beneficial, help you so much. I have people, they'll do it for 3 weeks, and then they'll come back in about 4th week and they'll say, I'm not feeling very good. I said, well, how'd you do the first few weeks? They said, well, for 3 weeks I felt great. Ask them if they're doing the mini meals, and they'll say, oh yeah, started skipping those. Those really make a difference. Remove refined foods and enrich white flours, enrich sugars, things that come out of box and cans. Try to eat whole foods. Caffeine from coffee, tea, chocolate, and pops, or these really super loaded drinks, really harmful to you long term. Emphasize raw fruits and vegetables. For some individuals, an emphasis on low fat, low protein may be more beneficial in the snack. So we want whole carbohydrates, whole grain carbohydrates. But also remember that in some cases, having a little protein, a little fat, and a little bit of a vegetable, such as a cheese stick with half an apple, is very beneficial, or 6 or 7 almonds with half an apple, or a pear, or a peach, or something like that. Okay, very beneficial. I love those things. Sweetie problems. Here's the symptoms. You crave sweets. Family history of diabetes. Incomplete relief of symptoms after beginning appropriate digestive aids. In other words, you've done everything right, you've followed the recommendations, but you just don't feel quite right. Okay, we know that the pancreas itself and your absorption utilization of sugar might be an issue, and getting evaluated for pre-diabetic hypoglycemic states would be wisdom. Okay, antibiotic, hormone, and steroid use, lower bowel gas several hours after eating, pass large amounts of foul-smelling gas. Again, antibiotics create abnormal, remember, antibiotics don't just go to your sinuses and correct them. It doesn't do that. I wish it did. If it did that, we would be home free, wouldn't we? But that's not how it works. It works on the whole body and kills off lots of that 2 pounds of good bacteria. And if it's not present, then the bad bacteria will take over and will create some of these issues. So we'll extensive hormone use or steroid use for asthma and other things to keep it under control, but can create lower bowel problems. Okay? Foul-smelling gas is a big issue with that. History of antibiotic use or corticosteroids, we've already mentioned that. Supplements needed, acidophilus, and acidophilus. Now there's multiple other strains, bifidus strains and stuff like that. If you've not picked up the book, The Probiotic Revolution by Dr. Hufnagel, we've interviewed him. He's on our site. Wonderful information, and it will be an eye-opener, mostly if you've had antibiotic use, even in years past. Many times if you've not refluorinated it, it's a really big issue. And here was just a small story. Doctor from Russia came in, and she now lives in the United States, does not live in Russia anymore, but used to be a medical doctor there. And we were talking about this whole issue of antibiotic use and everything, and she said, oh yeah, you guys got in trouble for using so many antibiotics in the United States. The world was really unhappy with you because you're producing these strains of bacteria that we don't have any way to treat them anymore. I said, yeah, I understand all that. She said, well, you know what doesn't make sense? I said, what's that? She said, I went in and I needed an antibiotic, and they gave me the antibiotic, but they didn't give me the acidophilus. I said, what do you mean they didn't give you the acidophilus? She said, well, in Russia, if we give you an antibiotic and we don't give you the acidophilus at a different time of the day to protect you against killing off all the good bacteria, creating other symptoms and problems, that's tantamount to malpractice in Russia. I said, boy, they must be awfully advanced over there in comparison to us. But remember that. You start on antibiotics, you know what's going to happen. You've got to refluorinate, and it can take 1 to 3 months to refluorinate. Okay? Metabolic acidosis, just something to consider. It's very common in the United States, often on diarrhea. High refined carbohydrate diet creating excess acid in the stomach. And we know acid can be harmful if it's the wrong type. Okay? Anti-inflammatory drug use. Sluggish, run down, irritable, increased fluid retention, etc. Okay? AIDS, we want to make sure your dietary problems are corrected by eating whole fruits and vegetables that do not create this acidic state that occur from boxed and canned foods. That's what really causes it. And metabolic acidosis is getting a lot of press right now because of it predisposing you to other conditions such as diabetes, obesity, or overweight conditions. Okay? So how do we aid digestion? Okay? Eat only when you're hungry. Okay? Find your lifetime diet that's best for you. Diet meaning a way to eat that makes you feel good, keeps your weight at a certain level that you can do every day and you're happy with. Not spasmodic diets based on the newest book that's regurgitated the same information that we know. If you've not got some of our seminars related to this, I try to be pretty poignant about this, is stop going off on tangents. You ever find that within a year or two you're right back where you were plus 10 to 20%? Why? Because it's a fad. It's not a habit. It's not a lifetime change. That's what needs to occur. Find what works for you and stick with it. Okay? Never eat when you are upset. The more you eat when you're upset, the stomach decreases the amount of acid in your stomach. And when you are eating when you're upset and the acid's low, you end up creating the same problem you're trying to get away from. And when you're upset and you have pain, it's not very fun. Not very fun at all. Eat some raw food with every meal. That's one recommendation that I think is key. Eat some raw food with every meal. It keeps the roughage up and helps you digest things faster, okay? Make small corrections at a time. Don't try to change everything one time. We try to change so much that our life is not adjusted to it, so the tendency is we go back to the same old habits again, okay? Take an appropriate digestive aid based upon what we've talked about today, and follow basic food combination principles. Eat fruits and vegetables and fruits and melons alone, okay? Vegetables and proteins can make a good combination, but try not to mix the fruits with the meat because it seems to cause some problems in certain cases. And try to stay away from those enriched white flours, sugars, and starches that are enriched. Okay? How to take care of your tummy? Stress affects your GI tract. Go to work on it. Those two of the most over-the-counter drugs, antacids and laxatives. Hydrochloric acid is not the problem. Hydrochloric acid deficiency maybe, mostly if you're over 40. You can almost count on it. Identify any current symptoms, take appropriate aids, change future habits, find a lifetime diet, eat raw foods, watch food combinations, eat only when you're hungry and never when you're upset. Okay? GI tract dysfunction. Huge amounts of money in it, huge amount of pain in it, and it can ruin your day. So why not make a change? Make a change today. Follow this seminar, some of the recommendations, some general experimentation yourself. If you're on medications, this seminar does not recommend that you stop those medications and start some bizarre program. You need to work with your doctor in those cases. If you're not on medications and you have some of those symptoms, you have all kinds of options that you can experiment with, okay? Safely, small dosage, easy going, make it a lifetime change, and probably you'll be able to correct many of your own problems because conservative approaches work, and they work every day. I want to thank you for tuning in. We hope that you're sharing this with family and friends as well as secondopinion.org and our Secrets to Vital Health that explains a lot of our principles of what we believe is going on and what needs to be done to make a difference for you. Remember, most of the top 6 diseases that we're suffering from in this country are most of the time preventable or postponable, and that's what we're trying to help you do. We'll look for you next time, and may God bless you.